So I think there's this narrative that's been perpetuated that stock cabs in a lot of these amp sims or amp modelers or effects processors are crap. And I say that because I have been very guilty in perpetuating this narrative. For a large portion of the time that I've had a Line 6 Helix, I have been using impulse responses, mainly own hammer impulses, because I just find them to be the best sounding, in my opinion. Now, this is a very subjective topic. Everybody's going to have their own preferences, choices, brand loyalties, etc. When I got my Helix and I initially felt like I was not getting the sounds I wanted, I jumped on the impulse response bandwagon. I jumped headfirst into IRs, and a couple things happened. I got a little bit closer, a lot quicker to the sound I was hearing, and I was overwhelmed by the sheer number of IRs available. So while I felt like I kind of skipped a few steps in getting the sound I was looking for, I skipped over how to get there a little bit more organically. I realized people want to jump into a piece of gear, plug and play and get going and get a sound immediately. I respect that. I understand it. I think it's good for stuff to get out of your way so that you can be creative. So I get that. But with that being said, there is something to be said about putting time, effort, and research into learning a piece of gear front and back. And I ended up doing that with the Helix, and I was very, very late to the game when it came to using stock cabs. And if it weren't for the Bunn sort of pushing me to dive a little bit deeper, to check them out, to see what they did have to offer, I wouldn't probably be making this video. So here's the thing, why am I making this video? The point is, I'm gonna walk through how I use stock cabs now. Now, I haven't kicked impulses to the curb 100%. I'm just finding more useful tones. I'm finding it easier to make quality tones within the box of my Helix. I'm not getting lost in all the choices. I'm not wasting time trying to find the right blend of microphones or the right IR. That's not to say you can't do that with stock cabs, but I'm finding that I'm able to land on a sound that I like a little bit quicker now. Having now explored what can be done with stock cabs inside of your Helix. If you really think about it, all of the stock cabs are essentially impulses. They have just been kind of organized in a nice streamlined user interface. We can select how far we want the mic, we can select which microphone, we can select if there's room ambience, we can control the EQ, etc. And we can blend two microphones very, very easily inside a Helix by using a dual cab block, something that I've really been exploring and experimenting with, as well as, if you have the horsepower, depending on the Helix you have, creating two individual paths, giving you a little bit more flexibility with blending two cab blocks. So we're gonna sit at the computer. I'm gonna kind of walk through some of my favorite stock cabs, some of my favorite microphones to pair together, and show you that you don't need to run away and you don't need to be afraid of stock cabs, at least in the Helix. So let's get to work. If you're into guitars, riffs, mixing, and everything in between, hit subscribe and follow along. All right, so I have a couple initial setups. I have a few tones. I have things in place already. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a dual cab block for one, kind of walk you through how that works. We're gonna use two cabs in a split signal, and then we're gonna kind of go over like mixing two different cabs, mixing with different microphones, etc. And we'll go over like an EQ approach that I've been taking in some of my recent tone creation. So let's dive in. So this first one we have here is we're using the dual cab block inside of Helix. So if we click here, we get single or dual. This allows us to use two cabs essentially. Now, why would you want to do that? For a couple of ways. You can either blend two different cabs with obviously different microphones if you wanted, or you can have the same cab twice but use different microphones, which is obviously a common technique that people do in a real world recording scenario. You know, they'll use an SM57 and a Royer 121 or a U87, blend them together, blend them to taste, etc. You can do that inside of here. Now with the dual cab, it's just one block, which is nice. It's a simple, clean layout here. So what do we have going on? We have a Horizon device, a Horizon drive, going into the badunk, going into this dual cab block, which I am using the 4x12 Uber T75. This is definitely one cab that I gravitate towards. It is a Bogner 4x12 with T75 speakers, and I like the T75 speaker in real world and in a lot of like emulators like this because of like the mid-range focus. It sounds good to me, pleasing to me. Now typically I was doing low cut and high cut inside of these cab blocks, but I've sort of begun to do that in my EQ block that I usually put after. The thing, a little quirk with the Helix is when you have a dual cab block, you won't notice it super dramatically if you're using the same cab. But if you're using different cabs, if you're blending different cabs, they seem to be panned hard left and hard right. So it gives this weird stereo type of sound that, you know, unless you're going for something like that, it's not favorable in my opinion. So after this dual cab block, I will put a mono EQ block because I'm typically going to be doing some EQ anyway. And that kind of sums it down to a mono signal. Now I do put a legacy room reverb to get like an ambient room tone, and that is stereo, so it is sort of bringing it back into a stereo, but I wanted to sum those cabs into a mono chain. All right, so that's what we're doing here. Now, again, I like the 4x12 Uber T75. I use it a lot. I've used it very recently a ton. And I'm using a combination of the 57 dynamic, right? And the 414. So this 57 dynamic is obviously a SM57, and the 414 is a AKG C414. The distance for both, I have it at 1 inch, so that's 1 inch from the grill, theoretically. Again, I have the low cut and the high cut off because I've kind of started doing it in this EQ block. Now, for the EQ, what I'm doing is I'm rolling off some high end. You're going to see that I'm kind of doing something a little bit contradictory here. And the best way I can demonstrate that is if I bring up my global EQ. Now, I've gone over this before. I don't have this instantiated, but I'll turn it on just for now. So what I'm doing is I'm rolling off highs. What are we going down to? 11K. I'm rolling off some high end. And that is like where a lot of people will claim they hear the artificialness of amp simulations or digital devices like this, the Helix, etc. That's where people will often claim they hear a difference between a real amp or cab and something like this. I also, you can see I'm boosting a little bit right here. So if I take this away, if I make it 0, it makes this a little more dramatic, this slope. So to kind of level it off and keep some of that high-end information, I had it at 2.6, just to kind of even off that slope. This is just a graphical representation of the theory of what I'm doing inside of my EQ block, okay? I don't know if this is exactly true to life. I'm not saying this is correct, but to my ears, this is something that I preferred. So instead of doing it in the global EQ, I'm doing it in my EQ block. Why? Because I don't always want to do this on all of my presets. And again, I'm showing you this on here as a graphical representation. So again, if I take this off down to 0, you can see this slope is a little more dramatic. And this sort of levels it off. It brings a little bit more of this high-end, sparkly, hissy information and doesn't completely get rid of it, okay? So again, I'm not using it here, I'm just showing it to you. Relax. So that's what I'm doing in this EQ block. I'm rolling off some of that high-end sizzle. So let's listen to it with, this is what we're working with. Now I'm rolling off high end and I'm rolling off low end because I'm trying to get a tone closer to mix ready, okay? Now let's listen to what it sounds like without the EQ. So you can hear it's pulling to that left side because of that dual cab sort of feel. So so we can get a better idea of what's happening. We'll add a mono tilt EQ. I'm not going to make any changes to it. We'll get a better idea of what the EQ is doing, okay? So again, this is with our EQ changes. I have this mono tilt EQ just to sum the dual cab from stereo to mono. It's just summing it, okay? This is the EQ that's actually doing something, our parametric EQ. It's on. All right, let's turn our parametric EQ off. A lot of high-end information up there, and a little bit too much woof. You might be able to get away with that low end, but I think in the context of a mix, you're going to end up rolling some of that off anyway. I'm just saving myself some time down the road. So let me show you something. If I bring up Studio One here, I have an EQ brought up, and let's look at, you can get a visual representation of what's happening with this guitar with no EQ. Pay attention to the high end. I have this frequency here for a reason, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But pay attention to how much high-end information is up here that's still audible, like in the -6, -9. Now let's turn our EQ back on, okay? Now, the thing is, our ears get really acclimated to sounds pretty quickly, so it almost sounds dead and dull after we've rolled some of that off. But I'm telling you, in most cases, you're going to end up rolling this stuff off or getting rid of it or trying to filter it out or multi-band compressing it because it's going to get out of hand. It's going to get hairy really quick. This is a more, in my opinion and in my experience, more of a mix-ready tone. Now down here, I have, on this track, you can see that we have audio here, an audio track there. I have the same EQ with the same frequency point as a reference. Now this is a popular band right now, the guitar track from a producer pack that I bought with the purchase of this particular band's album. And I'll play it a little bit, but I don't want to get a copyright claim. But this is basically to demonstrate more of a mix-ready guitar tone that's in a real commercial release, so we can see what's happening with it. So we can see at as low as 6K, it's dropping off pretty dramatically, and we don't have a ton of that other stuff that we were seeing with no EQ at all. Now, if we go back to ours, we could even get away with more of a dramatic curve, if you know what I mean. So if we go back to our reference, it's very flat, okay? Pretty steep drop off at about 6K. And right here, what's this? 7.6K. So between 6K and 7K, there's a pretty steep drop off. A little bit of a bump at 8K, and then it drops off again at about, you know, what's this, 10K or something? Let's see what this spike is. 13K. So, and I'm just using this as an example of what I'm going for, or my thought process, you know, trying to get the guitar tone closer to something that's going to fit better in a mix than having all this high end and all this low end and it being super scooped and being pleasing sounding when you're jamming, as opposed to something that's just not going to work in a mix. You know what I mean? So we can listen to these guitars, and I'll unmute it so you can hear that it's a real track. So if we see where the low end starts cutting too, it's about 93 Hertz. Cool. Now if we go back to ours, so let's put another point at 93. That's close enough. Frequency 93. So you can see that that commercial guitar tracking was much flatter across. So if we're gearing towards that a little bit more, we'd have some work to do. But again, I'm just showing you because if I take the EQ away and you just have raw amps, because people often, they question, why are you rolling off high end? Why are you rolling off low end? You know, you're going to lose the body of the guitar. You want your guitars to fit in a mix. No one's ever just listening to a guitar on its own. If you are, that's fine, but I'm not. So if we go back and look at our EQ again, look at all this high-end information. And this huge bump right here. Turn this EQ back on. Now again, I said we could even get away with probably bringing, let's bring this down. We can probably, this little bump I'm doing to flatten it out a little bit. Let's see what it looks like. That might be even better. So all right. So that was a long-winded way of explaining sort of my thought process with my EQ, all right? So what we're doing, again, back to the stock cab thing, is we're blending two different microphones here in one block, which is great. You can also split the signal. So what we're doing here is we have a single cab block, same 4x12 Uber T75, 4x12 Uber T75. This top one is the 57 dynamic. This bottom one is the 414. I'm going into parametric EQ block that is mono, so it's essentially the same thing. Again, I might roll this down a little bit. If I take off the EQ, Sounds better to me. So again, we're using the same stock cab in a single cab block. We're blending together two different microphones. So this is another use case for getting a sound that you want. So if we were to, like, you know, if we keep this 57, say it's a little bright, we want to kind of bring it back a little bit. We lose a little bit of that harshness. Okay, now let's try a different microphone. Let's 87 condenser mic, that's a U87. So we're back to a little bit brighter, a little bit brighter. But that low end is real tight, and those palm mutes are very pleasing. Let's try different mic. Maybe bring it back a little bit. So this one's not as bright. This blend is not as bright. It's kind of like evening it out a little bit, but there's also a little bit more of a boxy sound introduced to it. But that could work in your mix. That could be the sound you're going for. So Royer 121 ribbon mic evens the tone out, I think. Ah, it's got a low cut there. I love this combination too. 121 with the 57. To me, that might be a little too much low end. Let's see what's going on with our EQ. So we're getting a little woofiness right here. At about 150. Now, you don't want to get in the habit of using a visual as a way of sculpting a tone. I'm just trying to demonstrate with some of these changes, you know, what they look like. That might be fine. That might be fine. Look, our EQ is cutting at 79, so let's just bring it up to 90. Maybe we'll get rid of some of that. If we were to, you know, tailor this a little bit, we go to 150, bring the Q up to about 5, we'll go down 1.5 dB. We still have some of that low end girth. We got rid of a little bit of that woofy boxiness. Anyway, kind of cool. So another option when using stock cabs is not just blending two microphones like we're doing here, is blending two different cabs that potentially have different speakers. So if we go to this, I have another two cab blend, and you can do this with the dual cab block, but I just chose to do it this way for demonstration purposes. So we have the 4x12 Uber T75 with a 57 dynamic microphone. Let's take the low and the high cuts off. And then I have the 4x12 XXL V30 with the 57 and my same EQ we're starting off with. Oh, come on. I put the high cut all the way down. Of course it's going to sound like it's underwater. Okay, now we're back. So now the high cut is off. I had it all the way on. So if we go back and listen to the two, this is the Uber T75 with just two different mics. Now this is an Uber T75 and an 4x12 XXL V30 mixed together. So two different cabs with different speakers. So we're getting a little bit more girth in the low end, kind of complementing each other a little bit, maybe a little harsh. So we might want to tame the high end a little bit with something like this. Let's bring this back down. Maybe we don't need that little boost. We can maybe go down to 10K even. It sounds a little bit better to me. Now again, you don't want to use a visual as a reference, but let's just take a look at what we got going on here. Wow, this looks even closer to our reference track. So if we look at our reference, that dip at 6K, all right? And then our guitar, more dramatic dip at 6K, which, again, I'm not trying to copy that other guitar tone, but I'm using it, again, as a reference for guitars that are in a commercial-ready mix already. You can see we might be getting a little bit more a flatter of a response because of the blend of the two different speakers. Slightly scooped. It sounds good. It sounds real good. Sorry. So that is a blend of two different cabs, and you have a ton of cabs to choose from. I mean, look at all these different cabs. Now, 1x12s probably aren't going to work great for these type of tones, and bass cab probably not going to work either. But you still have tons to choose from. So it's just not to mention the mic selections for each of these. So all right, let's try a different mic with this. So we have two different cabs with two different speakers. We're using the same microphone, I believe. Yep. This one's a little bit further away from the cone. So if we were to try a different mic, let's try the 121. See, we introduced some more low ends, some more low mids. What about the 414? We might have gotten rid of our little scooped sound there. Yeah, a little bit more flat. So you can basically make EQ moves by changing the cab, switching out the microphone, adjusting the distance. So it's something to consider, something to think about. You know, if we were to even try this U87. Let's go back. I like this. Palm mutes might be a little farty for me. That's a bad way. Might be a little too much boom in the palm mutes for me, but you know, your options are just there, and you can blend two different cabs with the dual cab block. So let me just show you that. So let's copy this, and we will paste it here. Yes. And we'll call it stock cab BLND for blend. All right. Save it, and let's get rid of this. We'll bring up a dual cab block. We'll do the Uber T75. Again, I'm just using the ones that I like, that I prefer. You can experiment with different ones. Use a 57, and let's go to the, let's try the 4x12 Cali V30. How about? Let me take off the low and high cuts. Take this off. Because again, we're doing that in our EQ block. Okay. Turn up my guitar. Now you do seem to get a little bit more volume when you split the cabs that other way, which I can't totally, like, I don't know why there would be a difference, but there is. So. So this is not a bad combination. Let's try that U87 because it seemed to kind of bring in a little bit more, bite. Yeah. Palm mutes are, I like. Let's try an orange, because people love the orange. Get rid of the low cut, get rid of the high cut. So this is a combination of the Uber T75 and an orange 4x12. Ooh. That sounds pretty good. Let's try the 121 microphone. A little bit more low end, maybe a little woofy. Where's the 414? So, you know, the point I'm trying to make here is don't write off stock cabs. You can blend microphones. You can blend different cabs. You can take those and make EQ moves. You can roll off the high end and get it sound more mix ready. There are so many options that you have right inside the box. So don't just completely write them off. Spend a little time, get to know these, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at what you can get. Now, I have 2 Helix Preset Packs available, and they all utilize stock cabs. And in my personal opinion, I feel like they have ended up being some of the most versatile and best sounding presets that I've ended up making. Many of them have ended up in a lot of my more recent music. So, and again, I don't have anything against impulses. I love them. They serve their purpose. They have their place in this. The point is, don't be like me and completely write off stock cabs right at the beginning. Spend some time with them. Get to know them. See what they can do for you. All relating information and links can be found in the description down below. And if you found this video helpful, hit subscribe and stay up to date. Alright, I realize that video may have gone off the rails a little bit. And the point I was trying to make with using the reference track and showing EQ as a visual representation was not to clone someone else's tone. It was to demonstrate what a kind of mix-ready guitar tone from an actual commercial production sounds like / looks like on an EQ, and compare different EQ moves inside of Helix that kind of get you closer to a mix-ready tone, as well as showing you the difference between using different cabs and mixing different microphones and different types of cabs. But the overarching point was to try and demonstrate that with a mixture of cabs or a blend of the same cab with different microphones, and kind of having an idea, finessing these tools that we have within the Helix, you can get just as good of a tone, in my personal opinion, as you can by using impulse responses. So the point was to basically demonstrate this, because like I said, I perpetuated this whole IRs unlock the Helix for a long time, until I put the effort and time into learning how these stock cabs work. And now, as the case with my 2 Helix Preset Packs that a lot of you have kind of spoken very highly of, and I appreciate you guys for buying them and showing me the support, and I'm glad so many of you are getting use out of them. All those presets and tones and patches use stock cabs, both packs. And it's because I really learned and dove in and blended 2 cabs. I blended microphones, and I ended up making some of the best tones that I have ever made, hence why I made the preset packs. So don't feel, now while you can, of course, this is all subjective. Some of this might sound like crap to a lot of you, and that's fine. I know there's going to be people in the comments down below that say they prefer the liveliness of an impulse response, or it sounds more alive, or it sounds more, I don't know, dynamic or real. I don't know. I feel like that might be a little disingenuous, because I use those same buzzwords as well. And I don't know that that's the case. Again, coming from me, coming from my perspective, using my ears, all right? Not poo-pooing anything that you think sounds good or bad. But this is my approach, and I know that I went hard into the impulse response world, thinking I'm gonna get a better tone, only to realize and come around to the fact that I love stock cabs. All right, there is no right and wrong here. You're free to do and choose whatever you want and buy whatever you want. I just know that you can go down a wormhole with impulses and get lost and overwhelmed, and then what happens is it just distracts you from what you're supposed to be doing, and that's playing and writing music. So I definitely hope you guys got something out of this. Again, I'm not trying to talk you out of doing one or the other. I'm just trying to kind of show, based on my experience, based on the path I took to get back to stock cabs, that you don't need to jump ship and immediately go out and purchase a bunch of impulses. I hope you find it useful. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. Special shout out to those of you supporting me over on Patreon, and of course here as members on YouTube. And if you're looking for other ways to support me, the channel, and what I'm doing here, I of course have music for sale on Bandcamp and streaming everywhere music is streamed. Got some new exciting projects in the works. I can't wait to show you guys. I can't wait for you to hear the new music. I got a cool video coming up regarding the HX Stomp. I'm working hard, trying to put some stuff out for you. Still got Helix Tones in the works as well. Thank you guys for your patience, for your support, for joining me on the live streams, for joining me and Bunn on Wednesday nights for Bandless. Bandless is a sort of live streaming podcast type of thing that the Bunn and I do on Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're diving into everything having to do with being a solo creative, a musician, a YouTuber, all the behind the scenes, the mentality behind it, the philosophy, digging into the deep questions, talking about some topics that we often like to shy away from in the real world and on social media and stuff like that. Getting into the nitty-gritty, into the minutia of being a creative person and the effort and the work that it takes. So thank you guys for all your support with that. The Bunn and I have really seen a positive reaction from you guys, and it's awesome. The Bunn and I are also in the process of creating a collaborative Discord for our two communities to bring even more of you together. So that's in the works. We'll have more information as it becomes available. Again, live stream every Saturday night. Usually working on music, and I answer your questions. Thank you guys so much for hanging out and being there every Saturday. And to those who are new, who have shown up in the streams, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Thank you to all the new subs. I'm really stoked on building this community with you guys, so I really appreciate all your support. I am going to end this video here and just say I hope you're all doing well, stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you in the next one.